whatever she does, she's going to do well. So look into the eyes of Jama Brookes and you will see the future. Help me welcome Jama Brookes.
You know, in the beginning when I was chosen, I was absolutely shocked. I mean, I'm 20 years old. I am Generation Z. And if you sat through Dr. Everly's speech yesterday, I sat back and I was like, I'm his case study. Back in January 2012, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. And as many of those go, I was healthy. I barely even had a cold. And then all of a sudden, I was in the hospital for a month, terribly sick, getting blood transfusions and all the imaginable tests that you can even think of. Little did I know then that I know now, it was going to be a lifelong journey that I wasn't sure if I was prepared for, but I was sure that I was going to try to make it through. In 2014, my colon fell apart, literally disintegrated inside of me. I had a total colectomy, an ileostomy put up, and I became so weak that at times when I went out in public, my brother had to carry me because I literally could not take even one more step. I spent 3 birthdays in the hospital, my 13th, 15th, and 16th. So as you can already tell, my childhood looked a little bit different. I wasn't in high school, and while everyone else was out getting their 16th birthday cars, mine looked a little bit different. And it was during these times that I knew I was changing. I once was a soccer player and a ballerina, and now I was in the hospital bed. When there were days that I would go and run 4 miles, it was a lucky day to get in a wheelchair. It's a lucky day if I even had the muscles to smile. And during these moments in my life, which I have now spent over 250 days in the hospital, I've had 6 major bowel surgeries, I've had 4 ileostomy surgeries. People kept coming to me and they say, "You're so strong." And as a 12-year-old kid, those words rang so hollow. I was weaker than I had ever been before. I could not even lift up my own head. I couldn't even open up a bag of chips. What strength were they seeing? What did they mean by that? And one time when I was in the hospital, very ill, I had 3 drains in the ileostomy bag. And as I got out of the hospital bed, I was alone that day, which luckily I did not have many of those days. And as I looked down onto the floor, I saw a beautiful red tulip that had fallen out of the basket that someone had sent. And as I sat there staring at this beautiful tulip, as I bit down and picked it up with literally all the strength that I had, I realized in that moment, this beautiful flower still showed its beauty in even the most sterile of rooms. And I realized this strength, it was not physical strength. It wasn't maybe even mental strength at the time. No, it was the strength of humility, because I had hit rock bottom. And at this time, I became very interested in the idea of resilience. What is resilience? We talk about it a lot. We say it a lot. We use it a lot. You guys have many examples of how your communities are resilient, how your organizations are resilient. And we explain resilience as bouncing back. But I don't believe that definition has the full capacity to explain what resilience actually is. Resilience, it's not about bending back into the person you once were. No. Resilience is about bending forward into the person you're becoming. Because this recognizes that crises and critical incidents, they change us. We cannot prevent them. But we are seeing the world from a different perspective when we are sitting at rock bottom, when we are standing with people who have lost something that they can barely even explain. And so when you have changed and when you're bending forward, during my time, I kept on trying to go back to who I once was. I kept trying to go back to high school. I kept trying to go back to soccer and ballet. And then I realized in those moments, maybe that's not where I'm supposed to be. Maybe that's not my linear path. For me, it It was taking my family and going to a 5K and having them slap on ostomy bags. It was taking my friend from Kenya, her first time in the United States, and convincing her that all Americans slap on ostomy bags and run 5Ks. She never had a chance. For me, it was starting a new direction. But during this time, people never saw what really went on. During this time, people saw this smiling kid in the hospital. They didn't really think the situation was that bad. They really didn't think that I was in a life-threatening situation. And they really had no understanding of what was going on. And people kept telling me, just be positive. And my response was, resilience and positivity, they are not synonyms. Because positivity cannot even include everything that resilience is meant to be. Because there are times when everything hits the fan. There are times when we change. But sometimes the cup is not half full, but it's not half empty either. It's simply a cup. For me, I had to grieve and embrace what was going on. And actually, I didn't cry that often. In this picture that you see, it was after a 9-hour surgery up here at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And I was ready for the surgery, ironically, very prepared. But once I woke up, I needed to change my bandages. And when I started to peel back the bandages, I had a 7.5-inch scar that I had not planned for, and 32 staples aligning my abdomen. It's the things that catch us off guard sometimes. And sometimes the things that really hit us in the moment may kind of seem a little silly. For me, in this moment, when I was sitting there, I kept looking at my mom saying, what is my belly button going to look like? But that wasn't really what I was really in crisis about. I was just upset because I had not planned for this. In a few days along the line, I would be fine. It's just another step in the long journey that I was having to take. But although it may seem that being in the hospital and having surgeries and all of this was my crisis, but it wasn't. For me, it was the isolation. My friends, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14, 15, even up to 20, they didn't know how to support me. Peer support doesn't really exist within children when we go through crisis. They didn't know how to step up and say, we are here for you. We will listen to what you have to say, because they couldn't even hear it. They didn't want to know. For me too, my world, everyone kept looking at me so sad, like I was a hurt puppy. They didn't even give me the room to be happy. They didn't even give me the room to be strong and grow, because everyone just looked at me so pitiful. And I looked at them back saying, stop. Ask me what I want to do. Ask me who I am. Ask me how I am handling this. Don't just assume. Because you actually never know what that might be and what that might look like. So I actually have a physical representation of my journey, a little look into what it looks like. This organization, Beads of Courage, which I cannot take any responsibility for. You can look them up online. But they have a sheet that they give pediatric chronically ill patients. And each bead represents something different. And I have 2 volunteers showing you. When you first meet me, you would never know that I carry these along around. From the outside, I look like a 20-year young girl, and I know as you have seen me, you're like, why is she here? And she's a presenter? But these beads I carry with me. They have changed how I see the world. They have changed how I approach different things. And as you guys go through your own critical instances, whether it's personal or whether it's in your work, you all carry a bag of beads. Thank you. I just lay them on the floor. But when you carry these bags of beads, what do you do with them? What is your next step? The name of this conference is Finding a Balance. Explore and embrace. How do you expand? A lot of you have come here to show your lessons learned, and I guess these are my lessons learned as a child in crisis. But these beads, I knew that I had to do something different. My next step, I ended up turning to public speaking. Because although many of you sit here and think that she's Generation Z, she's young, she must be the outlier. And maybe I am, but also I know so many other young kids who are resilient or could be resilient but don't have the tools. And I'm here to represent them today. And the few that there are is Youth Rally. It's a camp for kids with bladder and bowel conditions. All of these kids have seen a quite different life. All of them have lived the typical experience. And the interesting thing about this camp is it's actually a peer-to-peer support model. All the campers and all the counselors have all bladder and bowel conditions. So when we are getting beside of them, we can help them with learning how to do medical independence, or learning how do you handle school, what resources do you have, how can we help you, how can we build confidence so you can then turn to the next person and peer support them, because we believe that you have it in you. And for me too, I want to say that resilience, you don't always have to lose all parts of yourself. This was my senior ballet recital. And as I was about to walk on stage, people asked me, "Are you afraid? Are you scared?" And I said, "Oh, no. I could go out there and do the chicken dance, and my mom would stand up and scream." But it was just the fact that I kept the tenacity, that I, my gosh, was not going to lose the grounding place that I'd had since I was 3 years old. And though I may never be a professional ballerina, which at some point maybe I wanted to be, I knew that where I needed and where I went, and the strength that I had gained, despite all that I had lost, was much greater than I had before. Because through this, I found the strength of empathy, the strength to stand beside my peers, and as they began to stumble, to just lightly put a hand on their back to guide them to take a step forward in the first step of their many journeys. But as you may think, how is she resilient? But my journey is not over yet. This is just simply 2 months ago. I'm at Appalachian State University, and I led a service project to Bronx, New York. And as I was there, I started becoming deathly ill, and I knew something was wrong. I still showed up, and even though I couldn't stand, I still sat, and I helped POTS do their service and lead my group into discussion. And then 5 days later, 24 hours after I got home, I was in the hospital, and a day later I had emergency surgery. And next Wednesday, I have the one to actually fix the problem. Probably about 5 hours long, probably 7 inches far again, but not really worried about it, because this is where I need to be here today. These beads will forever follow with me. This journey will forever give unexpected turns. My gosh, I was not going to let it define me. And part of it, like George Everly's presentation, I had the best mom in the world. She has done this work before I could even remember. At 5 years old, she came in and she said, "Jama, I'm not going to be able to come to your soccer game." And I looked at her and said, "Did somebody die?" And she knew then there was no chance of me being ever normal again. Before I went into this journey, I had 6 critical incident stress management courses. Very unusual for a 12-year-old, 11-year-old. But out of my siblings, I was kind of like, "Hey, Mom, I'm kind of interested in what you do. I'll sit through your classes. I'll participate." I think our next step as a community, we need to start looking at our youth, because they are an untapped resource, a presentation that my mom and I co-presented at the last World Congress. They too can be resilient, and they too can come along you and help, maybe, and support in ways that you had never imagined. And if there's anything that I want you to get out of this presentation, I want you to remember that every single one of you carry your beads. So how you approach a critical incident or how it affects you, it doesn't affect the person beside you. It may because what you're already carrying with you. And remember, everyone has these. When you walk into these critical incidents, you're walking in for this one incident, but be aware that sometimes what comes up is the things that they already carry, that was brought up by it. Don't make assumptions to everyone you meet, and when you do, you'll find an amazing world that maybe you hadn't before. And don't forget about the youth. We need to start finding ways and making classes to promote our resilience, because George Everly is right. We do have some of the lowest mental states that have been recorded. Look out into the world and take the next step for your community. Find appropriate ways for your youth and support them in the way that they can, but also you can build peer support within them as well. You might be surprised at what they bring to the table. Thank you.